We met Bill Stephenson in November of 2000.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to
TA in Florence, Kentucky.
Hey, we're having chapel service over in the trailer if you want to join us.
The way of the cross leads home.
That's Peggy in the purple. This is the Truckers' Chapel at the TA truck stop in Florence. The Stevensons and a group of volunteers turned this trailer into a truckers' church. It was one of Bill's favorite projects.
Amen. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Amen.
Hallelujah.
Thank you, Bill.
If you're willing to go, God will give you a place to go.
It was a very complex, brutal, disturbing crime scene.
Beloved husband and wife, Bill and Peggy Stephenson. A concerned family member found them when they didn't show up for church.
That crime scene, of all the crime scenes I've been on, was the most unique by far.
The crime scene was staged afterwards, after the homicides. So somebody is in there for probably a couple hours.
Doing crazy stuff with the scene.
Well, staging it. We'll leave it at that.
There were things that were done to their bodies that was horrific. They changed several things in the scene, which is really, really unusual for any murder scene anywhere in the country or in the world.
Investigators released new information saying it was between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. But more disturbing was this bizarre twist.
We know someone spent a considerable amount of time in that home after the deaths, arranging the crime scene in such a manner it can only be is unique.
Bill and his wife were brutally killed. Cause of death, stabbing, and blunt force trauma. But the crime scene is something investigators and federal experts are still scratching their heads about.
There were symbols, there were items that were used at the scene to indicate strong feelings or opinions about the victims, Bill and Peggy.
Detective Cox says the evidence proves the killer or killers were either with the bodies for several hours or came back to the home long after the murders. No eyewitnesses, no murder weapon found. The home was cleaned, the bodies staged in a certain way, littered with odd items. Cox won't call it a satanic ritual or sacrifice, but he does believe the killer was trying to communicate something.
They left behind a legacy of helping other people, and for now, a mystery as to who and why anyone would want to put an end to it.
In November 2022, a tip led them to a neighboring state.
We had received some information from an individual regarding the Delphi murders in Indiana.
Right away, detectives started looking into a possible connection between Bill and Peggy's 2011 murder and the murders of Abby Williams and Libby German in Delphi, Indiana in 2017.
There's things that will make you really interested in a case, simply more than just somebody saying, hey, we think this person might have been involved. But we had a little piece of information that really made that case specifically interesting to us.
To be clear, Detective Cox says their investigation into a potential link between the two cases did not include Richard Allen.
We received information from Indiana as it related to some persons, and we forwarded that to them. We did not send them the information that led them to Richard Allen. We sent them information that may have had some parallel consistencies with where they are with that case right now.
When Boone County detectives were in Delphi, Allen was already in jail, where he has been since October of 2022, accused of Abby and Libby's murders.
A lot of those things, the staging, multiple victims, spending time after, post-mortem, after the murders, a lot of those things make these kind of cases like the 1% kind of cases that you see.
Robert Stephenson is in the Boone County Jail on a $50,000 cash bond for alleged evidence tampering and drug trafficking.
Prosecutors, for the first time publicly, linked Stephenson to the murder of his friend, Lee Jennings.
Mr. Stephenson is confirmed to be the last person known to be with Ms. Jennings when she was alive.
Commonwealth Attorney Linda Talley-Smith says Boone County investigators got involved with the Indiana case when they searched Stevenson's home here. Then 2 days later, when he tried to kill himself, Lee Jennings was found dead inside her Aurora home with multiple skull fractures. Today, Stephenson was named a suspect in that case for the first time.
He has absolutely no criminal history.
Prosecutors say they also have a fraud case against Stephenson involving hundreds of thousands of dollars. They'll bring that in May.
Prosecutors say Charles Stephenson used a large pepper grinder and an iron skillet to kill the 67-year-old last March at her home on Aspen Ridge Drive in Aurora. Police say Stephenson stole $1,000 from Jennings to repay a debt to a family member. In May, a jury found him guilty of murder and robbery, and today the judge sentenced Stephenson to life in prison without parole.
We're learning more about Stephenson's background and his finances. It was November 1994 when his mother, Marie Josephine, or Jo, died in a fire at the family's Walton home on Beaver Road. It was a year after his father died, so Stephenson was named executor of his mother's will and inherited the entire estate valued at $326,000. He used what was the home's basement for his insurance business. This February, he sold nearly 16 acres of that property to Kelly Fulmer and Francis Wireman for $273,000. When an uncle, Albert Stephenson, died, Charles was left out of the will. The estate was worth $178,000, and his uncle, Bill Stephenson, was the executor. Finally, there was the matter of his aunt, Faye Sparks, who sued her nephew for $3,700 she'd loaned him and he hadn't paid back.
The 2006 probate filing in which he was cut out of a family inheritance of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the executor was Bill Stephenson, his uncle.
The Stephenson's daughter, Beth Victor, told 9 News in an interview she feared the person responsible for her parents' murder could be someone she knew.
They had no enemies, not an enemy in the world.
There were items that were used at the scene to indicate strong feelings or opinions about the victims, Bill and Peggy.
In August 2012 brought a big break. The Kentucky Crime Lab had found DNA belonging to the killer.
And it is by far the best evidence that we could ever hope to have at this point.
We now know who you are genetically.
We genetically know who the person is. genetically, but there's no match. It makes no sense.
Check the DNA of Charles Robert Stephenson.
We have.
Does that match with the DNA that you found?
Obviously, no.
Is he no longer a suspect then?
I don't know. We never did identify him as a suspect. Anything else?
Can you say now he's not a suspect?
I can tell you that's not his DNA.
Detective Cox says they've even spoken to him recently. Stevie is locked up, spending life in prison for beating an Indiana woman to death with a skillet.
We feel pretty comfortable that that's in a good place. There is no final statement on there. It isn't that he's been cleared, but we have certainly vetted him in every way possible.
One of the largest developments in the case could still bring them the break they need to close it. Detective Cox says they have an unknown DNA profile.
We don't know who that DNA belongs to, and it was found at our crime scene.
It is complex, so genealogy isn't an option, at least right now. There is testing they can do to try to find a match, and that's something they're actively pursuing.